Welcome to the Beacon of Light podcast from the pulpit. Our prophet, President Nelson, said these words, "My dear sisters, we need you. We need your strength, your conversion, your conviction, and your ability to lead, your wisdom, and your voice. We simply cannot gather Israel without you. How will we do this? Through our general conference talks. So come closer to Christ. Help gather Israel and watch for his return." The Beacon of Light podcast starts now. Hello, everyone. So, burying out our weapons of rebellion. Ooh, so, hurt my wrist. Anyway, we're going to move on. So, this is from Elder Todd Christofferson. There we go. Got it. All right. So, burying the weapons. So, you can think of it like this: swords, whatever you want to think of. But in today's world, it might be a little bit different. We're going to jump into that a little bit later. So he talks about this story that's in the Book of Mormon. And basically, the Lamanites, they heard the gospel message. They heard the truth. And it just changed their hearts. And they knew that it was very important to just change their whole life, change everything. And they did. So they dug a pit, threw down all of their weapons, and at that point, that was their showing the Lord that they were serious and that they were finished. So then we think about and what Elder Christofferson, what he asks us to think about is, what are our weapons of rebellion? And are we actively rebelling? Or are we more kind of passively rebelling? And when I mean rebelling against God. So we need to bury our weapons of rebellion, and that leads us to joy. So these are the 4 things that we're going to get into today. Here we go. The Lamanites, they heard the truth, they buried their weapons, and it was from an amazing missionary named Ammon and his brethren. They went out and taught the people about Jesus Christ and the truthfulness of the gospel. And the Lamanites believed in all of their words, and they were converted to the truth. They had no more desire to sin, to do evil, to do these wars. They were finished. So it says in the scriptures, "For they became a righteous people, and they did lay down their weapons of rebellion, and they did not fight against God anymore, neither against any of their brethren." The Lamanites laying down their weapons of rebellion, it really means this actual, like literal, it's right there, and figurative meaning. So it meant that their swords and their weapons, obviously were buried. But so was their changed, so they also changed their heart, and it got converted unto God, and they just had no more desire to do that evil anymore. They started to obey his commandments, obey God, obey the commandments, and followed through with that, and they found the joy there. And so now, Elder Christofferson, he says, what are y'all's weapons of rebellion? And he's also pointing to himself, myself, all of us there. We all rebel. And we'll get into a little deeper what that really means. So he offered some kind of general things. Do we rebel against God because we're super focused on all of our careers, or um, delaying having children or getting married? Maybe stop going and having religion, or just focusing here on yourself, or whatever your words are doing. Are they spewing hate? And what are your actions doing? Are they rebelling against God? If they are, maybe we should do something similar symbolically and lay down those things so we can turn back to God. So the Lamanites, he says, rather than risk any possible return to their prior state against God, they buried those swords and the weapons. And as they buried those physical weapons with a changed heart, they buried that desire to sin anymore. They wanted a change. I'm just thinking right now, as I'm helping students, there are a few students who you watch and you observe, and they willfully, like, they're constantly fighting against so many things out of fear, out of like the lack of control, just this fight. If they conformed in, they would be so much more joyful. And it's just a simple way to think about this. When we lay down those weapons of rebellion, whatever they might be, and become converted to the Lord, that stain of sin, the desire for sin that's in our heart, it's taken away. And we want to stay there in that conversion. So, well, what are active rebellious states? What does that actually look like? What do people do with that? Okay, so he goes right back to the scriptures on the very first rebellion, Satan up in heaven. And that's a classic example of willfully rebelling. And Satan, or Lucifer, who in our pre-mortal world, he opposed the Father's plan of redemption, and he rallied others to oppose it as well. And in that day, many followed after him. It's not hard to discern the impact of his continual rebellion in our time today. We see a lot of different things happening, and Satan trying to capture our heart, whisper things like, don't need to pray, don't need that, you don't need to read your scriptures, just do all these little things, and they will add up. They will add up to big things too. He gives another example, and this comes from the Book of Mormon. And in the Book of Mormon, there are three AntiChrists. First is Sherem, Nahor, and Korihor. And they have this, I guess you could say, classic story of active rebellion against God. And these three, the biggest thing that they said was, there's no sin. There's nothing bad here. Everything's fine. You only need to do what your heart desires, what you feel is good, because there's really no sin. It's fine. Oh boy. If you are listening to people who tell you to follow your heart, follow these things like no rules, doesn't matter, get out of there, because it's not going to be good. Another part of this is that every man prosperous according to his genius, and whatever man or people, what they do, there's no problem. There's no crime. There's no mistakes. Like you're not accountable to anything. Whatever your actions are, it's fine. We'll just accept it all. Well, if you don't believe in God, that's really a desirable thing to want. But if you know there is a God, you know that there's a truth, there's a right and a wrong, and that's just universal truth that just is the place. So these people, they would try to convert your heart back to sin and not want to stay with God. Another act of rebellion happened in Joseph Smith's time. Well, there were several, but he just named one. And his name is William W. Phelps. And he joined the church in 1831. And he did a lot of things with the church. And in the talk, he talked about he was a printer, he was an editor, he helped to write hymns, he served the prophet as a scribe. So he's heavily involved in really amazing things that are happening. So he has gained a testimony. He's seen these things happening right there. And then he chose to leave. And in choosing to leave, he started to slander the prophet. He started to bear testimony that actually put the prophet in jail. He lied. And because his heart was not protected and it had changed back to following Satan. What's interesting is that there's always hope. There's still some hope out there. And there was for W. Phelps. His story is that he eventually asked to return back to the church. He asked for forgiveness, and Joseph Smith granted that in friendship and full fellowship back to the church. There's a lot of repenting on his side and his heart to change. Really important. But there's always hope. So if you've made mistakes, don't think you're stuck out there forever, because that's not true. Satan will try to convince you of that, but don't listen to that. Change, stand where you are, and try again, and it's going to be okay. Now, this is a guilty part, I'm sure, for many of us, me, sure. This passive rebellion, I'm too tired. Do I really have to? There's so many other busy things to work on. So he names Elder Christofferson. He names a few things that are really important. And he says, perhaps some of our rebellion would be that we're not reading our scriptures. We are thinking about what I want and not really what God wants. What is his will versus our will? We ignore his will. Maybe we just kind of jump in and just focus in on working so hard and ignore family or what have you. We ignore our kids. We ignore our marriage. Maybe we jump in like that because we have this fear of failing. Maybe we're stuck worshiping our bodies. Health, 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 health. There's a balance with all of that. That's true. So that's this idea. There's probably thousands and thousands of countless things that we can passively rebel against God. So keep it focused. Keep your light on God. Keep your eyes on God and his light. And just try every day and do your praying and read your scriptures. Things happen and things will improve for sure. And so when we kind of do this examination of ourselves, like, where we're lacking or where we've maybe stopped, or maybe we've broken a habit of reading or praying, start up again. This is the gospel of trying and of effort, for sure. So, Elder Christofferson, he says, follow the Spirit. When you're tempted to just go to sleep instead of pray, pray anyway. Put the first commandment first in our lives, which is to do what? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. So put him first. Everything else falls into place. So it means letting God prevail. Bearing our weapons of rebellion, if we love our God, our determination to serve him with all of our might, mind, and strength becomes that touchstone by which we will be judged for all things and make all of our decisions. We will have buried our weapons of rebellion. What a great promise. And I know that so many of us, if we're in that effort and trying, it's going to be okay. It's going to work. So, because you have that willing heart and a willing mind and bearing those weapons of rebellion, it leads to this joy. And this is the gospel of joy because we're leaving behind those sins or the temptations from Satan. We are working forward and accepting that Christ is the way and the commandments to be followed, and going to church, reading your scriptures, praying together, paying your tithing, attending the temple. So if we can remember those things, and again, they're always simple. They're not like, oh, I've never heard of that. They're always the things that we should be doing every day. But it protects us. So it is super important. So he just has this willing heart, Elder Christofferson. He says, may we bury very, very deep an element of rebellion against God in our lives and replace it with a willing heart and a willing mind. So I always think of that as here's your heart and it's always open to receive. I think of it that way. So thank you guys for popping in here and for being with us tonight. Thank you, Abby and Gabe and anyone else who popped in here live. We appreciate that. And thank you for sharing this out to other people. And it is for all faiths, for all people to know that Christ is there. Christ's light is for all. And when you find that pinpoint of light, follow it, and it will become stronger and wider as a ray to a beam to a beacon of light. Thanks, you all. Please be forever shining. See you next week. Bye-bye.